Hello and welcome everyone. So excited to have you today at our Architect Community Meetup. I have with me Jacob Small and he has a wonderful presentation all about generative design. We'll be learning how to understand lacing. So I'll let him introduce all of that. But while we're waiting for people to join and get all their audio set up, I would love for you to open up the questions panel and type in there where you are joining us from. And I'll just give everyone a shout out. It looks like Adam is in from Texas, and I've got to make this bigger or I can't read it. My darn eyes are going as I get older. All right, so Adam from Texas, nice to have you. Danny, it looks like from Phoenix. Arlie from Utah, nice to have you. I'm from Utah as well. All right, Arpit from Virginia and Timothy from Pennsylvania. Usama from Minnesota. I apologize if I say it wrong. Teda from Los Angeles. John from Denver. David from Denver. Nice to have a couple of you from Colorado. That's great. Berkram from Las Vegas. Sven from Newfoundland. Awesome. Nathaniel from San Diego. And let's see, let me scroll up a little. There we go. This one I might pronounce wrong as well, sorry. Joyo from Durham, North Carolina. Richard from California. Jason from Washington. And it looks like we are starting to steady off on the attendees. So I think I'll go ahead and start off in some of our orders of business before I turn it over to Jacob. So let me go ahead and just jump right in. We have two more generative design topics, of course, today, where we're going to be talking about lacing. And then we'll have one more on December 22nd. And we'll talk a little bit about understanding less. I say we. I really mean Jacob. He's the star of the show. And so I'm going to skip this because I know Jacob goes over it as well. But before we begin, I do want to let you know that your lines are muted. That doesn't mean you're off the hook. I do encourage a lot of interaction. So definitely type your questions in the Q&A panel, or you can raise your hand in that participants panel and I can unmute your line. And we love that interaction so that we can have a two-way conversation in these sessions. It allows you to get exactly what you need out of the sessions. So the only reason the lines are muted is because a recording is being done and the recording will be sent out to you. It will be emailed tomorrow and you can share that with your friends, neighbors, coworkers, whoever you want, or you can just rewatch it if you really felt this was valuable today and want to, revisit anything. One last thing that I want to introduce you to, if you joined us at Autodesk University, you did learn a little bit about the group network. And the group network is a really great network that brings different communities together. So it's a global network of user groups, developer groups, and online groups. And you can join the group to connect with others, to learn, build relationships, and to share your knowledge. The network includes both physical and online and virtual groups. So you can filter by product or by industry or by local location. You can even filter by language to find out about more groups that speak the same language and whatnot. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually put a link in the chat panel in just a moment when I turn it over to Jacob so that you can go and visit the group network. But the reason I bring that up today is because after December, the group network is actually going to be taking over these meetups. And so that will give you an opportunity to present at your group a little bit more, be able to hear from other customers just like you, how they're solving problems. And so after December, we are going to be taking just a little bit of a break and revisiting how we can make this a much more of a community involvement and get more interaction between everyone. So I definitely want to go out and look at the community dojo and the community pages to stay up to date on when the new meetups will start back up. So probably looking for that in February, but I don't want to make any promises because like I said, the group network will be taking those over. So excited for that. All right, so Jacob, let me go ahead and make it you the presenter now and let you take over.
All right.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen. I'll let you know if I can't see it.
Hopefully you're seeing the intro slide there.
Yes, we are seeing the intro slide now. Perfect.
Awesome.
All right, Jacob, the time is yours.
Thanks. So welcome everybody. This is session 5. This is all about list lacing and processing data effectively in Dynamo. So we've got 4 examples that came before this, which were more about, what are different data types? How do we navigate the user interface? Those have all been hosted. Definitely worth going and checking those out after the fact, in case anything that I mentioned here is a little bit more advanced. So a little bit about me. I am a designated support specialist focusing on generative design and BIM, which is a really long title. That means I help some of our largest customers in the EBAs and stuff like that adopt our different technologies at kind of a high level, specifically Revit, Dynamo, generative design for Revit, BIM 360 design, and similar applications. I'm trained with a sort of architectural background, graduated Wentworth back in 2006 out of the Boston area, and practiced architecture for about 10 or 11 years before joining Autodesk 3 years back now. I do show this slide during all of my presentations. It's a lot of words. The big thing to take away from here is don't make any purchasing decisions based on content that I might make mention of development actively working on. You want to make your purchasing decisions based on the capabilities in the product today. So looking at the agenda, I've got about 15 minutes. I might go to 20, might go 12, but it should be about 15 minutes presentation on working with list lacing. Then we're going to get into question and answers. And if we do go long, I've got some additional slides that we can talk about list levels with. So lacing. And so we talked about in an earlier session in the series, every node you place on Canvas in Dynamo is basically a function, right? Functions, another way to say each node is basically going to perform a given action on whatever data that you feed it. With single input nodes such as the string.length node, which we talked about a lot or utilized a lot in the last session, it's just going to work on every item in the list that you give it. So if you give it red, green, yellow, blue, it's going to tell you, the string length node is going to tell you how long each one of those words is, right? Now, it's going to just do that by default over that the full length of the list. But how does stuff work when we start to get multiple inputs, right? So if I have a node that takes, let's say this line start endpoint, takes a start point, and we could feed in the list of start points, and an endpoint, we could feed in a list of endpoints. How is that going to draw different lines if those 2 different lists of links are different? 2 lists are of different lengths, right? One way we can start to try and look at this would be to come up with a real example, right? So towards that end, let's say we have an object, in this case, the number 1, and then we have a function, the addition function, and we wanted to add to that another object, the number 1 once again, right? 1 plus 1, well, that's pretty easy. That equals 2. Okay. Now, I could also take a list of objects, 1, 2, 3. I could add to those a function, wire those into that function that takes a single object in this case, right? Okay, 1 plus 1, that's easy enough. 2 plus 1, easy enough. 3 plus 1, easy enough. 4, right? This should make some sense to this point, I hope. Now we go from here, and if we take a list instead and we add that, wire that into a function, and then we add another list. Okay, this starts to get a little bit more complex, and you could sort of just draw the line straight across, and that's probably what your mind's doing right away, right? 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, 3 plus 3 is 6. But what really gets interesting is if I have that list, 1, 2, 3, wire that into a function with another list that's a different length. 1 plus 1 is 1, 2 plus 2, or 1 plus 1 is 2, sorry. 2 plus 2 is 4, 3 plus, wait a minute, what do I do with that 3? Right? And this is that sort of piece, because computers wind up being really, really stupid. And if you don't tell them exactly how to deal with these sort of situations, you have to sort of expect to get results that you're not expecting. So the way Dynamo deals with this is list lacing. Okay? There are 4 different types of lacing in Dynamo: shortest, longest, cross product, and automatic. Shortest, the icon is just a single vertical line. This is going to match index to index. So in that example of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, it's going to take the first item in the first list, 1, the first item in the second list, 1, add those 2 together. second in the first list, 2, second in the second, 2, add those 2 together, get 4, third in the first. There is no third item in the second list. We're going to stop right there. So we don't get any more results other than the 2 and 4, right? Longest lacing, however, the next option on that list is going to match index to index until we run out of items in that first list, and it's going to keep using that last item. So 1 and 1, 2, 2 and 2, 4, 3. No item in that second list, it's going to reuse the 2. 3 plus 2, 5. If I had a fourth item in the first list, we still only have 2 in the second list, so it's going to be 4 plus 2, 6. 5 plus 2, 7. Doesn't matter how long my first list is, as long as I still have items in there, it's going to go back and reuse that other item. Crossproduct is going to take every item in the first list and mix it with every item in the second list. The icon here are the sort of crisscross lines. That hopefully will make a little bit more sense when we get a little bit further on here, but crossproduct is basically going to say every item against every item. So first list 1, 2, 3, second list 1, 2. 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3. Our first set of outputs is 2 and 3. Go to the next item in the first list. 2 and 1 is 3, 2 and 2 is 4. Our second list output is going to be 3 and 4. Go to the next one, 3 and 1, 3 and 1 is 4, 3 and 2 is 5. Then we finally move on to the next sequence. The last type of lacing is automatic lacing. Automatic lacing is going to apply shortest lacing, but it's going to push single items as if longest lacing was selected. This is the default. So if any of your inputs are a single item, then it's going to be longest lacing. Otherwise, it's going to behave as shortest lacing. So in that example of 1, 2, 3 plus 1, 2, it's going to default to shortest lacing because we have a list as both of our inputs. If either one of those was a single item, so if we did 1, 2, 3 plus the number 1, it's going to use that number 1 against all those other pieces because it's going to default to longest lacing. So let's take a moment to build up a quick graph that we can use to sort of build this content up, right? I'm going to switch back over to Dynamo, and hopefully, Michelle, if this doesn't show you as Dynamo, please interrupt me. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start by placing a string node on the canvas, and I'm going to put into that canvas a color. I'm going to type red, and then we'll place another string node. And I'm right-clicking on my desktop background to place these. We can also just Control-C, Control-V, and we'll place a few different, so I don't have to search quite so much. Orange, whoop, yellow, green, need one more, blue, and purple. And I'm going to put a space at the end of each one of these words, and we'll see why in a minute. And now I've got all of my different strings, but these are individual items, right? I want to combine these so that they're a single item. So I'm going to use a list.create node and join these into a list. Index 0, index 1, index 2, and I'm saying index 0 is our start because Dynamo is counting through indices, right? So all our lists start counting at 0, right? So when I preview this data, you can see 0 is our first item. We start there, and then we count by offsets. Offset by 1, we get orange. Offset by 2, we get yellow. Offset by 3, green, so on and so forth. Now with our list of colors built, I'm now going to build a list of animals. We'll place a new string node, copy and paste that, and we are going to mix an elephant and a fish. We're going to, once again, combine those into a single list. So we use a list create node. Elephant is index 0, fish is index 1. And now we are going to use an addition node. So the addition node will work with strings, which is pretty cool. And what it does, it's going to join string 1 to string 2. And that gives us our output, right? We are done. Now we can start to manipulate the lacing. I'm going to start by taking this and changing the lacing by right-clicking on the node. This is how we access that submenu, going into our lacing options, and we're going to start with shortest. We're going to start to sort of review what the outputs are on this code, all right? Don't worry if you didn't get to keep up. If you were trying to keep up, not intending for you guys to keep up, just for you to get to sort of see how this all works. So popping back over to PowerPoint, we've got our two pieces, and we can break this down visually like this, right? So we've got a list of colors on the left. We're going to add those together with the list of animals, right? With our shortest lacing, what do we think that's going to give us? Well, we're going to start, first item in the first list is red. First item in the second list is elephant. Combine those two, we are going to get a red elephant. Second item in the first list, orange. Second item in the second list, fish. Combine those two, orange fish. Third item in the first list, yellow. There is no third item in the second list. Stop the process because we are on shortest lacing. Red elephant and an orange fish is the result. Popping back over to Dynamo to have a look at what this looks like. We're going to put a watch node on the canvas. And sure enough, we have a red elephant and an orange fish. All right. And this sort of simple toy graph, building these sort of graphs that allow you to sort of experiment and understand what the outcome is and how data is processed will really help you go a long way in terms of getting to know Dynamo and really get the most use out of the product. All right, so there is our results. Now let's look at our next type of lacing. List of colors plus the list of animals. We set that lacing to longest, right? So longest lacing icon, 2 vertical lines and the diagonal line, right? Representing taking that last item in the first list and mixing it with the next item in the shorter list. So we're going to take red and elephant, red elephant, orange and fish, orange fish, yellow, no more items in that second list. So we're going to go back to fish, yellow fish, green and fish, green fish, because again, no more items. Blue, no more items, reuse the fish, blue fish. Purple, no more items, reuse that list, purple fish. Get a whole bunch of fish and a rather confused elephant in terms of why he's in there. Now let's have a look at that in Dynamo. Again, we're going to use that same graph. I'm just going to right click on this. We're going to choose lacing. I'm going to move that over to longest. I'm going to do this. You can see once again, we've got red elephant, orange fish, yellow fish, green fish, blue fish, purple fish. Okay. And then once again, here it is with the fully annotated graph telling what all is happening all the way through. All right, next type of lacing. We're going to move pretty quick through the list here, right? So next type of lacing, we've got our list of colors. We've got our list of animals. We're going to join those two together with the addition node, only we're going to use Crossproduct. This is going to take every item in the first list and draw all the different lines to the second list. From the first item, all the different lines. Second item, all the different lines, because we're going to mix everything with everything else. Right? So the way that works, red and elephant, red and fish. Notice I reused that red. I stayed with that output, right? Then we're out of items in that second list, so we go down to the second item in that first list. Orange, first item in the second list. Elephant, second item. Fish, no more items. Or orange elephant, orange fish. Go down to the next color. Yellow, we've got an elephant, we've got a fish. Yellow elephant, yellow fish, nothing else. Move on to the next color, fourth. Green elephant fish, so on and so forth. Looking at that over here on Dynamo, when we go ahead and right click and change our lacing here, I'm going to set this over to Crossproduct. And now you're starting to see we've got a red elephant, a red fish, an orange elephant, orange fish, right? This is a much longer list than the other lists that we've looked at, and that's by design. Looking at this graphically, it winds up like this. And notice I went out of my way to make sure we had the groups sort of set up here. Each one of these outputs is an individual sublist that I've grouped, right? That's because if we go back and we look here, we do actually have sublists within our list, right? It is a list of lists of animals of different colors, right? And that's really important to understand, okay? All right, so there's that output there. Now the next question on lacing and the last option for lacing options is automatic, right? So list of colors plus list of animals with automatic lacing. I've got a list and I've got a list. Automatic lacing means longest lacing, or sorry, shortest lacing, unless one of the items is a single item. I've got a list and a list, so there are no single items, so we're going to go to shortest lacing. Therefore, we've got red and elephant, we've got orange and fish, we've got yellow and nothing else, so we get rid of yellow, green, blue, and violet, right? We're just discarding those options. We get a red elephant and an orange fish. And then once again, popping back over to Dynamo, right click, we'll change lacing to auto, red elephant and an orange fish. That's pretty good. All right, so we've gone through all the different options in terms of lacing and looked at what those results could be. But what if I wanted this kind of an output, right? If we think back, when we did our cross product before, and we'll pop back over to Dynamo here. I'm going to change my lacing to say cross product. When I do this, we got everything grouped by color rather than grouped by animal. If I wanted to have stuff grouped by animal, or by animal as opposed to color like we're seeing here, what would we do? Right? Well, we can't just change that lacing icon because we've went through all our different options to get there. There's some more other options, sort of higher levels of complexity. But if we think back to that last session that we actually had this list transpose node, right? And this is, again, a really, really useful node all its own. What this does is it's going to turn our rows into columns, our columns into rows, right? You can think of it like rotating a spreadsheet 90 degrees to get that sort of output. The key thing here is we're doing that same sort of rotating of that spreadsheet, only we're working with a different type of data, right? We're not working with numbers or rows or columns. We're working with animals grouped either by color or animal type. So popping back over to Dynamo, we're going to take this original sort of list here. I'm going to take one more time a list.transpose node, pop this out on canvas, wire this in, and we're going to put one more watch node on canvas so we can compare the results of these two as we go. And now you can see that content has sort of popped its way over. And now we are grouping everything by elephants all together of all the different colors and the fish all together of all the different colors, rather than the red animals, the orange animals, the yellow animals, so on and so forth. Okay. This is a really key piece to sort of understand, looking at how this actually works. And I speak to this all the time, but I think it's really important to have some kind of way to sort of visually describe this stuff too. You can see the way this works out here. We're taking the first item in each list of sublist of animals, and that becomes our first list. In the same order that they were created in terms of the sublist, they get moved over, right? So our red elephant, our orange elephant, yellow elephant, green, blue, and purple. Okay. From there, we're going to go to the second item in each list in the order that it happened. So red fish, orange fish, yellow fish, green fish, blue fish, purple fish. And that becomes our sort of new resulting list, right? Hopefully that makes some good sense there. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is we are not limited to just two different options. And this is why I do think, again, taking the time to build graphs like this that aren't necessarily solving a problem, but are helping you sort of really understand the problem is really, really important. Let's say we had another animal. So I'm going to come in here. We're going to copy this node down here, and we'll come up with another animal, horse. Right? And I'm going to hit the plus button on my list create to get one more input. And we'll join this in. And you can see it's still producing that same sort of output on that cross product. If we go over to change the lacing to shortest, red, orange, yellow, right? Elephant, fish, horse, right? It's discarding those additional pieces. Now, the big key piece here, and the reason why I highlight that we've lost some colors there, is a lot of times people will come to me and say, hey, I lost data as I was working through my graph. Why did I lose data? It doesn't make sense. And what it is Dynamo doesn't know how you want to work with that content. It's going to do its thing by default based on what that lacing setting is. And that default lacing setting on that auto setting is going to be that shortest value. And that's why we get that sort of discarding of the color green, blue, and purple. To maintain that, you have to explicitly tell Dynamo how you want to handle the data to make sure that that goes forward. All right, that was everything. I think I might actually be a little bit under on the planned time. Hopefully it all made sense. I do have these resources here, highlight these during all the different sessions. So we've got information on the Dynamo BIM website, right, to get basic information about Dynamo. That's at dynamobim.org. Dynamo's home on the web. I definitely recommend checking out the blog periodically, maybe once a month, give or take, just to see what good new things are coming up. Always tons of good resources coming up there. Dynamobuilds.com is where to go if you want to work with a newer version of Dynamo Sandbox or get a Dynamo for Revit version up to Revit 2019, which caps at Dynamo 2.0.4. Newer builds of Revit 2020 on, have the Dynamo integration sort of tied into the installer. So if you need a newer version of Dynamo for Revit, you need to update your Revit in 2020 and on. Dynamo's GitHub is the source to go for all of the sort of Dynamo development news. That's where the Dynamo development team's actively working. So if you do have any sort of questions in terms of what's coming next, or you wanted to submit your own pull request to make Dynamo better on your own, you can do that on the GitHub. That's github.com/dynamods/dynamo. You can also, any issues you have with Dynamo in terms of the way the program is working, you can go there. To get started with learning Dynamo, you can go to the Dynamo Primer, primer.dynamobim.org, which has tons of great learning content to basically walk you through building graphs similar to this. The key piece there is to not skip anything. It's not important that you get the result. What's important are the methods used to achieve the result, right? So even if you're, let's say, I don't know, an electrical engineer, and you're like, I'm never going to be the one who lays the solar panels out on the roof. I just care about wiring them up. Why am I doing this exercise? It's not about laying the solar panels on the roof. It's understand the lacing that was used to get that sort of array on the roof, because that will be something that you will use within Dynamo over time. So skip no exercise, even if the outcome it doesn't seem like something that you need to do or will use tomorrow. After that, definitely want to plug the Dynamo forums, forum.dynamobim.com, which has all sorts of great examples of user interaction within the community. So you can reach out to individuals, find out, hey, how did this work? Is there anything that is there? And yes, we will be providing a PDF of this. I think we've given it out a few times early, so we'll get that out on the post as well when we share the content back up. From there, we've got the Dynamo Dictionary, which has a direct example of how to use basically all the nodes that we provide with the standard Dynamo content at dictionary.dynamobim.com. And then there's a sister website for dynamonodes.com, which will walk you through how to use many of the custom nodes in the various packages that are out there. Got a couple resources on there for learning DesignScript, which is the textual language under the hood that runs inside Dynamo, as well as information on Dynamo Python if you wanted to get started with sort of more direct coding there. And then some links to generative design as well. I will highlight there the generative design primer at generativedesign.org, which has sort of the key pieces that you need to learn as you get started with generative design. All right, so with all of that said, any questions?
So if you do have questions, go ahead and type those into the Q&A panel, or you can raise your hand in the attendee panel and I will unmute your line. Everyone must be having their dinner right now.
I was going to say, it's a tough time to be doing questions.
Okay, I see Dawn, you've raised your hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line. It looks like you're self-muted. So if you can unmute. Don Luther?
A comment first. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, comment it first. Putting white characters on a light gray background is not the easiest thing to see when you're trying to figure out where you've gone wrong and you find out it's some little character in lacing. But
yeah. To that end, I know that the Dynamo team's going over a refresh, and you can actually change the colors of the nodes as well. So if that gray background isn't great in terms of the visual aspect, you can look at the Iris view extension to color the nodes however you may like. It may make it more difficult to sort of understand some of the other aspects. There's a lot of really dense data that's added in there, but it is possible to sort of manually tweak the coloring on your graphs as needed. So hopefully that'll help you in the long term.
My question really is trying to understand the difference between the auto and the short. And
yeah, that's a great question. So let's pop back here. I'm on auto lacing right now on the graph, right? And so you can see it down here as that sort of dark gray or the gray auto on the other gray piece. I've got a list of items that I'm putting in here right now. So auto lacing is going to use shortest lacing unless a single item is given. So right now, my first input is a list, and I'm not going to change this input for now. My second input is also a list. If I change this over so I feed it just elephant, instead of the list of all the animals, watch what happens to my watch node right there. This is taking that single piece and it's working instead of shortest lacing, it's defaulted to longest, right? Now, if I come back here and I wire the group in, that's what that sort of longest would wind up doing. It would sort of duplicate the horse, which is that last piece in there. So over and over and over and over again, right? We've got all these extra horses. Maybe that's what we want, maybe it's not. There are other things, and we'll talk a little bit about this, plan on covering list level in the next session, but you can imagine we could tell Dynamo to work with just the elephant, finish off working with the elephant, and then move on to the fish, and then move on to the horse by manipulating the level at which the list is worked with. Does that answer that question for you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. I see another question. We have Civil 3D only. Can we buy it by itself from Mizel Ramirez? The great news is that, yes, Dynamo is something that you can leverage. You don't even have to buy it. So you can see here, I'm using Dynamo sort of by itself, this icon up here in the top corner. This means I'm in Dynamo Sandbox. So I don't have any tie to Civil 3D. I don't have any tie to Revit. I don't have any tie to any other application. This is just Dynamo being Dynamo, which is pretty handy. The other great thing for you is there's actually Dynamo for Civil 3D as well, which you can get through if you go to manage.autodesk.com and you've got access to install Civil 3D. You should be able to download Dynamo for Civil 3D as well, install that in there, and then use the same functionality that you're seeing here in the Civil 3D environment. Plus, you'll have some additional nodes up at the top of your library for working with Civil 3D and AutoCAD objects directly, which is pretty cool. All right. I skipped over John Torres's question, so I'm going to go back to that as well. John asks, is it possible you can export out to Excel? And the answer to that question is yes. That's a great question. In order to do that, we can go into this import-export session here, go to data, and then you can see we can export out to Excel, and this will give us sort of a list of a node that will allow us to sort of take different pieces of data and filter that content out and put it where we need to work with it. So definitely something that can be done. If other people don't have questions, I can sort of go through specifically how to work with this piece, but more or less you just give it a file path, the name of the sheet you want to write to in Excel, which row you want to start with, right? So you've got your rows from 1 through however many. A lot of times we'll start with row 0. Sometimes you'll start with row 1. Maybe you've got your columns already populated. And then which column you want to start with. Do you want to start column A is 0, column B is 1, so on and so forth. Again, 0 indexing, right? And then which data we want to put in there. We just wire this piece in. And then that content would sort of write itself out from there, which is pretty handy. You do have to have a nested list of lists in order to get that to work correctly, though. All right, and I'm lost in my Q&A, so hopefully Michelle can.
That's okay. Yeah, sorry. I was muted earlier and started repeating some questions, and I was like, oh, he's got it. He's good. He doesn't need me. All right, Tada is, and I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, is asking, is lists and lacing a common challenge to teach the average Revit user who wants to learn Dynamo?
It really is. And the reason being, when you talk, the question itself sort of leads the answer, right? When you refer to a Revit user, most of those people have either an architecture background, like most of the people I'm assuming on this call, or an engineering background, mechanical, electrical, structural, plumbing, something like that. They understand those sort of problems. They don't necessarily understand teaching a computer how to solve those sort of problems. So these sort of structures of data and working with different structures is really a challenge. It's something that's totally foreign to us, right? Even if you go back and you look back at that sort of slide where it said, you know, number 1 plus number 1, everybody gets that. But number 1, 2, 3 plus number 1, 2, suddenly people start to scratch their head. And so it really helps to have that sort of content broken down to sort of, when I originally started these slides, it was basically Dr. Seuss animals, right? I need to bring this down to the level of teaching the concept rather than thinking about the architectural applications.
And it looks like we have 2 questions related to electrical. So I'm going to start with the one from Eddie. Can Dynamo help me in AutoCAD electrical?
Dynamo can help you automate routine processes in many, many different ways. There is not currently a direct integration for AutoCAD electrical. So you might want to come out, go to the Revit, or sorry, the ideas station on the form and say, for AutoCAD electrical, I want a Dynamo integration, and they get people to vote that up and maybe sway development to take that on a little bit earlier than they otherwise might. But what you can do, there's a great package called Link DWG, which will actually allow you to manipulate AutoCAD objects even though you haven't launched Dynamo from AutoCAD directly. So it's not a formal integration. It is a bit slower than a direct integration would be, which you might have through, let's say, Dynamo for Civil 3D or Dynamo for Revit, because it's using the COM interop, so it's not quite as stable or quite as quick, but it can definitely automate a lot of those repetitive tasks. One sort of thing that comes to mind, I don't know how to use AutoCAD electrical, I've never done it, but looking at sort of an electrical task, one thing that I used to struggle with all the time is the electrical engineer would come out and say, so either you can live with wherever I put the outlets on the wall, or I need you to tell me where you want them. And that's really, really time consuming if we have, let's say, a really big hotel project, kind of the classic example, right? Even just something as simple as the switches, right? I need a switch next to every single door. My God, that's going to take me forever. There are 800 rooms in this hotel, and I need one in the guest room, I need one in the guest bath door, I need one here, there, all over the place. If you can figure out how to lay it out once programmatically, you can tell Dynamo to lay all of those out for you as actual elements, tell them to circuit them up, even link them to the light fixtures if you want. So there's really sort of the sky's the limit in terms of how it works. It's just more a question of understanding how to tell Dynamo to do those kind of pieces.
Great. And Chris is asking, I'm an electrical coordinator. How might I use Dynamo to place electrical equipment, such as a panel, in electrical rooms throughout the building that vary in size and location?
That's a good question. So we'll go back to that idea of, I'm not going to use the electric panel because I don't know the rules for placing the electric panel, but I do know the rules for placing a switch, right? So every time I go into a room, I want to switch 42 inches above the finished floor, 6 inches off the door frame, right? And when we go through, if you're in a different location, if you're in Europe or something like that, the dimensions are slightly off, but you have basically a rule that says place it here. So what I would do is I would say for every door, if it's a door into a guest room, right? And I'm going back to that hotel example. Every time I go into that room, find the door, find the room, find the wall that the door's in, go 6 inches off the door frame and place a family instance, and 42 inches up off the floor, place a family instance on the associated wall at that point with whatever rotation you want. And then do that for all the rooms in the hotel. It's a graph, it takes probably 2 hours to write and write well. And once you've done that, you never really have to worry about placing that switch on the wall again. Now your panel within the electric room is a bit more difficult, right? Because there's a lot more rules than just 6 inches off the door, 42 inches up the floor. You probably want it on the wall opposite the door, and you probably need to make sure you have the clearances in front and all that other stuff. If you can break down where it wants to be and figure out what the rule is to find where it lives, it becomes a little bit simpler in terms of placing that.
Excellent. All right, and Karen asked the question, what is an example of a task in Revit that architect Revit would lacing be used? So.
It's a good question. So let's take, for example, you have rooms that you've written all that data out to Excel, and you've manipulated the data in Excel, and now you want to bring that data back into Revit, right? So that's going to be get the room and then element set parameter value at name. Okay. Default lacing, I've got 36 different parameters that I want to set for 300 different rooms. Default lacing is only going to process shortest, right? So it's going to say first to first, or second to second, third to third, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to set, let's say, the room number parameter, which might be my first consistently. Instead, I'm going to set room number, room name, room finish on the floor, room wall finish, room baseboard, right? All that content, it's just going to draw the diagonal line through Excel. You want to fill everything out, right? So that's probably more like a cross product or longest lacing or adjusting our list levels. There's 5 or 6 different ways to do it, but it's really important that we get a good understanding of what those options are, because otherwise I'm going to have to place another element set parameter value by name node on the canvas for every value that's in there. And I've seen graphs like the idea of I had 800 different parameters that I have to set. That's not a joke. I've seen people copy and paste set parameter value by name nodes 800 times and then write the string they want in 800 different string nodes and wire that up just to get that content to work. So it's much simpler if you make use of list lacing. And that's a pretty basic example that happens early on in a lot of people's Dynamo journeys on the architecture side. Another example would be, let's say we wanted to place a whole bunch of different content. Let's say we'll do the solar panels up on the roof, right? I want to place all the points for all the solar panels, and we need a whole array of options. You can think point at parameter would give me one value here if I had 0, 0, and then I can have another one at 1, 1, and I have to fill kind of all the values throughout that space. You're probably going to use cross-product lacing to make sure you mix every parameter on the U value against every parameter on the V.
Right. So if you do have any questions, we're all out of questions in the Q&A panel, so either type that question in or raise your hand and I will unmute your line.
Cool. If there aren't any other questions, we can go back. I will fill out the example of writing the data out to Excel. And if you do have any other questions, again, type them up. But in the meantime, we're going to go back. We're going to make this data a bit more complex. So I'm going to take the list of animal colors and I'm going to come back here and I'm going to change this back over to cross-product lacing, right? So now I've got all the animals after transposing them grouped by, all the animals grouped by the animal type. So all the elephants are together, all the fish are together, all the horses are together, all right? Now I'm going to provide it a file path. So we'll right click and we'll search for file, helps to spell right. There we go. And I do have to quickly open up a new file browser and figure out where I want to keep this. So give me 1 second. Here we go. And I'm going to click into this browse section here and it pops open my file browser and we'll paste this in here. And this is the path where I'm going to store this. And in order to make a new Excel file where I don't have one yet, handy thing, you can actually just right click and then we'll say new Microsoft Excel worksheet. And it creates it and then we give it a name here. So animals by color to Excel. And then we'll pick this piece and we'll say open. You can see it sets that path and it shares the entirety of the path there for us. I'm going to wire that file path in. Now it's going to ask for sheet name. If I hover over this, it tells me then what it is that this input's sort of built for. So the name of the worksheet to write the data to, right? And if you think to Excel, you've got the tabs down at the bottom for all the different worksheets that are in there. This is looking for a string. So I'll come here and I'll type sheet 1. Right? And you can fill out whatever value you want there that Excel will take. It's looking for the start row. This is a number. And again, we can hover over this. It's looking for an integer, right? Enter 0 for row 1, 1 for 2, etc. It's looking for a start column. Again, it's another integer, 0 for column A, 1 for column B, etc. So we're going to start at 0, 0. I'm just going to ask for data and whether it wants to overwrite or not. I'm going to set the overwrite first. I'm going to set that to true. I'm also going to change my run mode. I'm going to go from automatic, where it's going to instantly run anytime I make any kind of a change. We'll click here and we'll change that value to manual. I'm going to wire the list of data now in on that data. And then we're going to hit run, right? Because I changed this over to manual, I have to manually push this. Notice when I hover it, it lets me know F5 on my keyboard would do the same thing. So we'll hit run. and run has started. It's going to take a minute. You can see Excel has sort of opened itself up. It's now flashing at me, and if I pop it over here, you can see it has now written that data out, and it writes the data in terms of the rows. So we can see the group of elephants, or it's my first row, the group of fish is my second, the group of horses is my third. Now, if I wanted that the other direction, we'll go ahead and we'll minimize this, and instead of working with the transposed data, I'm going to work with the non-transposed data, and then we'll hit run. Run's completed, and if we come back here to Excel, you can see we are grouping by the color on the row and the animal on the column. All right, so
Excellent.
bonus tip, we went over writing out to Excel as well, which is pretty handy.
So if you do have additional questions, definitely type those in the Q&A or raise your hand in the attendee panel. Okay, it looks like we're all out of questions. So with that, we will give you some time back to your evening, or I know some of you were from overseas as well, so maybe back to your day. And we will hope to see you here on the 22nd.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.